That day started out ordinary. I was sipping my morning coffee, staring out the window. Life outside moved in its usual rhythm. The old lady in the next building hung her laundry. The grocer downstairs rolled up his shutters. I was preparing to log into work on my computer. Nothing unusual. No visitors. No deliveries. No reason for surprises. And then, the doorbell rang. At first, I ignored it. Maybe the building manager, or someone pressing the wrong button. But then it rang again, longer, sharper, impatient. A faint unease crept into me. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. No one. Just the dimly lit hallway stretching out in silence. When I cracked the door open, I saw it, a package on the floor. No courier, no neighbor. Just a brown box, sealed with tape, my name and address written neatly on top. The strangest part? No sender information. No company, no name, nothing. It wasn't huge, but it had weight. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly, though I couldn't tell if it was from the weight or the rising anxiety inside me. I carried it in, set it on the table, and just stared. Who could have sent this? I muttered to myself. Must be a mistake. Maybe a friend? But I didn't have friends close enough to send me anything. Not anymore. Not anyone who'd know my address. I grabbed a kitchen knife, carefully sliced the tape. Some part of me screamed, "Don't open it." But curiosity was stronger. I lifted the flap. Inside was a smaller black box. It was matte, almost absorbing the light, with a small metallic latch. Beside it, tucked neatly against the cardboard, was an envelope. I opened the envelope. One short sentence stared back at me. "Do not open this. If you do, it will find you." A chill shot down my spine. The handwriting was neat but unsettling, the kind of script that felt deliberately unnatural. Every instinct told me to stop. But my fingers, trembling, reached for the latch. The latch clicked open with ease. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no money, no gadget, no object of value. Just a single black and white photograph. My heart skipped. The photo showed the front of my apartment building, my building. And in the corner of the frame, there I was, throwing out the trash. Same clothes I had worn a few days ago. I had never noticed anyone taking a picture. But what made my blood run cold were the figures in the background. Blurred, shadowy silhouettes. Unclear, but human enough to feel wrong. Watching. I flipped the photo. On the back, another message. "You don't realize it yet, but we are watching you." My chest tightened. I set the photo down quickly, like it burned to touch. Panic pushed me toward the window. I yanked open the curtain, scanned the street. People went about their normal business. Nothing unusual. But I couldn't shake it. From now on, every face, every passerby looked like a threat. Then I noticed the box wasn't empty. The bottom seemed thicker. I pressed it. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a small USB drive. With a trembling hand, I plugged it into my computer. One file appeared. Watch_me.mp4. I hesitated. Then I clicked. The screen filled with an image of my own room. This room. Same desk, same chair, same walls. The perspective was from above, like a hidden camera lodged in the ceiling. And in the footage, I was there. From last night. Sitting at my desk, typing on my laptop, completely unaware. The video played in silence, until near the end. That's when I saw it. Behind me, at the window, a figure. A shadow, standing just beyond the curtain, staring in. I froze. My throat tightened, breath refused to come. I spun around. Yanked the curtains open. Nothing. No one. But I knew. I was no longer alone. I slammed the laptop shut, as if that would erase what I had seen. My pulse hammered in my temples. The rational part of me tried to speak. Maybe it's a prank. Someone hacked your camera. Someone edited the footage. But deep down I knew, my laptop had no built-in camera. The angle in the footage was from the ceiling, a place I could not reach without a ladder. Which meant the camera was real. Which meant someone had been inside. The thought made my skin crawl. My apartment, my safe space, had been violated. Every shadow in the room now looked like it might conceal a lens. I searched frantically, behind bookshelves, under the desk, in the corners near the ceiling. Nothing. But the sense of eyes watching lingered, heavy, suffocating. Then came another sound. Thud. From the hallway. I froze. My ears strained toward the door. Another thud. Something sliding against the floor, closer. I approached cautiously, every step hesitant. When I peeked through the peephole, my heart sank. Another package. Smaller this time, black tape crisscrossing its surface. No footsteps retreating, no voices in the hall. Just silence. I didn't want to touch it. But leaving it out there felt worse, like an invitation for whoever left it to keep playing. Against my better judgment, I brought it inside. No envelope this time. Just the box. When I opened it, I found something that made my stomach lurch out a lock of hair. Dark curled, tied with a piece of red thread. And beneath it, another photograph. This one was taken from inside my apartment. It showed me, asleep in bed. The hair wasn't mine. I staggered back, nausea rising in my throat. My vision swam. How had they gotten in? How many times? I wanted to call the police, but doubt paralyzed me. The evidence looked insane. Cryptic notes, photos, boxes that appeared and vanished without a trace. What if they didn't believe me? Then I noticed something else in the photograph. At the edge of the frame, almost blending with the shadows near my closet, a faint outline. A man-shaped blur. He was in the room when the photo was taken, watching me sleep. My phone slipped from my hand. I collapsed into the chair, trembling. And then the phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. I picked it up. Don't look for us. We're already here. I dropped the phone as if it were burning. The room spun. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. My rational mind fractured, replaced by raw fear. I couldn't stay. I had to get out. I grabbed my jacket, keys, and bolted for the door. The street outside looked normal. Too normal. Children's laughter, the hum of traffic, neighbors carrying groceries. But I couldn't shake the feeling that behind every window, every corner, unseen eyes followed me. I walked fast, almost running, until I reached the cafe on the corner. Public. Bright. Safe. I ordered a coffee just to anchor myself, hands trembling as I clutched the cup. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Why are you running? I looked around. Every face blurred into suspicion. A man with a newspaper. A woman tapping on her laptop. A teenager scrolling his phone. Any of them could be the sender. I left the cafe. I couldn't breathe there. I wandered aimlessly, through streets and alleys, trying to escape eyes I couldn't see. As evening fell, exhaustion drove me back toward home. My legs moved on autopilot. Some part of me knew it was foolish, but where else could I go? When I reached my building, something new awaited me. The front door stood ajar. My blood turned to ice. I crept inside. The hallway was silent, the air heavy. My apartment door was open too. Every instinct screamed to run, but something drew me in. like the story had already been written and I was only playing my part. Inside, the lights were on. On the table lay a third package. Larger. Waiting. I wanted to turn away, but my body betrayed me. I opened it. Inside was a mirror. Small, rectangular, propped at an angle so it reflected my face. But as I leaned closer, the reflection shifted. It wasn't me. The figure in the glass looked like me, but its eyes were wrong, dark, hollow pits, a faint smile curling on lips that weren't mine. I stumbled back, knocking the box to the floor. The mirror cracked, the image shattering into twisted fragments. And then, the lights went out. Pitch black. A whisper brushed my ear, close, too close. "We found you." I spun, swinging wildly in the dark. Nothing. My chest heaved, my pulse deafening. The whisper came again, from behind this time. Then in front. Then everywhere. "We found you. We found you. We found you." The sound swelled, overlapping voices, a chorus of shadows pressing in. My mind splintered under the weight of it. And in that final instant, before everything went silent, I realized the truth. The packages, the photographs, the notes, they weren't warnings. They were invitations. I hadn't been the victim. I had been chosen. And now, I belonged to them. When the realization sank in, it was not like a sudden blow. It was slow, suffocating, like drowning. The room seemed to shrink, walls breathing, shadows elongating unnaturally across the cracked mirror. I couldn't scream. My voice died in my throat, swallowed by the chorus of whispers that had erupted moments before. And then, just as abruptly as they had come, silence. The light flickered back on. My apartment looked the same. The packages still lay scattered, the photographs, the broken mirror. But the air was wrong. Heavy, electric, as though it had absorbed every ounce of fear I had spilled. I pressed my back to the wall, clutching the edge of the desk to steady myself. My breath rasped loud in my ears. Maybe, I told myself, I had hallucinated. Maybe sleep deprivation, stress, paranoia. My mind grasped desperately for a rational anchor. But then my phone buzzed. A new message. "Go to sleep." I dropped the phone instantly, as if the words carried a physical sting. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to read again what I had already seen. Sleep? The last thing I could do was sleep. Yet exhaustion clawed at me. Every nerve stretched taut, every muscle trembling. My body betrayed me, pulling me toward bed despite the terror. I curled under the blanket, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Every creak in the walls became a footstep. Every gust of wind outside became breathing. The thought of closing my eyes felt like suicide. But at some point, maybe minutes, maybe hours, consciousness slipped away. I dreamed of nothing. Just blackness. When I opened my eyes, the room was dim with morning light. And on the pillow beside me, another envelope, hands shaking, reeled. This was insane. This was absurd. Why me? Why now? Every rational instinct screamed to destroy the note, call the police, leave town. But deep inside, I knew none of those options existed anymore. The moment I opened that first package, I had stepped into something I could not step out of. They weren't asking. They were commanding. And I was already theirs. The day passed in a haze. I drifted between rooms, unable to focus, every second stretched into hours. The clock ticked louder than it should. My reflection in the bathroom mirror seemed delayed, as though it didn't quite move with me. When the sun dipped, I found myself dressing without conscious thought. Dark clothes plain. I walked out into the night, my body carrying me while my mind screamed to stop. The city streets were empty by the time I reached the docks. The warehouse loomed like a carcass, windows shattered, rust bleeding down its walls. The note hadn't said what to do once I arrived. Just be there. So I entered. The interior was cavernous, dark except for slivers of moonlight seeping through broken panes. The air smelled of oil and salt water, thick with decay. At first, silence. My footsteps echoed, lonely alien. I almost convinced myself I was alone. Then movement. Not a sound, not a shape, just the unmistakable sense of presence. The same heavy air from my apartment, pressing against my skin. I turned. Shadows shifted. Not in the way shadows should, tied to objects, bound by light. These moved freely, rippling across the floor and walls like living things. My chest seized. I stumbled back, colliding with a rusted beam. And then the whispers returned. Not from one direction, everywhere. They flooded the vast space, overlapping, unintelligible yet horribly intimate. My own name surfaced, hissed among them, over and over. I clutched my head, desperate to shut them out. My knees buckled. I collapsed onto the cold concrete. And in that moment, the shadows converged. Not into a single shape, not into anything I could describe, but into a mass. A density of darkness, thick and deliberate. I couldn't see eyes, yet I felt them. Staring, piercing, stripping me down to the marrow. The whispers quieted. And in the silence, one voice rose, clear, distinct. Obedience. It vibrated through me, not heard but felt, resonating in bone and blood. I couldn't reply. My throat locked. The darkness swelled, enveloping me. And then, blackness. I woke in my apartment. No memory of how I got there. My clothes still reeked of salt and rust. The packages were gone. The photographs, the mirror shards, everything vanished. For a moment, I convinced myself I had gone mad. That it was all a fever dream. But then I saw the new mark. On my forearm, etched into the skin, faint but undeniable, a symbol. A circle, intersected by jagged lines. It wasn't drawn. It wasn't ink. It was burned. I touched it. The skin was hot, pulsing faintly as though alive. And in that instant, I understood the truth. This wasn't over. It had only begun. I wasn't free. I was bound. Not to a group, not to people I could fight or escape. Bound to them. To whatever had chosen me. And wherever I went, whatever I did, I knew they would be there. Watching. Waiting. Whispering. The reflection in the bathroom mirror smiled again, this time without delay. And it wasn't me. I hadn't been the victim. I had been chosen. And now, I belonged to them. The realization didn't strike like a sudden blow. It crept in slowly, like ink spreading through water, staining everything it touched. My apartment felt alive, not with warmth or comfort, but with a lurking presence. Shadows stretched along the walls, bending at impossible angles, clinging to the corners where no light reached. Every object, my desk, the scattered photographs, the broken mirror, seemed to pulse with a silent heartbeat. I pressed my back to the wall, trying to ground myself in something tangible. My phone buzzed. Another message, unknown number. You will follow. You will obey. Resistance is irrelevant. My pulse spiked. My hands shook so violently I dropped the phone. I wanted to run, smash the windows, call someone, anyone, but every thought felt slow, sluggish, like wading through thick water. Sleep had become impossible. Even lying under the blankets, staring at the ceiling, my eyes couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. Every faint creak, every whisper of wind, every flicker of light became a potential threat. The first night passed in a haze, my mind teetering on the edge of collapse. I barely remember when unconsciousness overtook me. When I awoke, sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds. My apartment seemed normal, too normal. And then I saw it, a new envelope on my bedside table. My name was written in block letters, sterile, mechanical. Inside, a single page. Typed. No flourish, no signature. Tonight, 9 p.m. Abandoned warehouse. You will come alone. Obey. A chill ran down my spine. The world around me felt unreal, as though I had crossed the threshold into a place governed by unknown rules. Rationality, logic, even fear itself, were useless here. I walked the day in a daze, passing mirrors and windows without recognition, haunted by the image of myself in that final mirror in my apartment. Each glance at my reflection made me flinch, as though the figure staring back had a mind of its own. By dusk, I found myself at the docks. The warehouse loomed like a carcass. Rusted metal groaned in the wind, broken glass gleamed under the weak moonlight. My feet moved of their own accord, drawn to the threshold like prey to a predator. Inside, darkness swallowed me. The smell of oil and decay filled my nostrils. The vast emptiness made every echo of my footsteps sound like a drumbeat announcing my trespass. And then it began. A presence. Not audible, not visible, just felt. It pressed against me, heavy and inescapable. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision, too fluid, too deliberate. I staggered back. Whispers began, first faint, overlapping, a chorus of countless voices. My own name came up repeatedly, sometimes hissed, sometimes chanted, sometimes urgent, almost pleading. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. The darkness congealed, solidifying into a mass that seemed to breathe around me. My eyes tried to adjust, but there was nothing to see, just a pressure, heavy and suffocating. Then one voice emerged. Clear. Distinct. Not spoken but felt. Vibrating in my bones. Obedience. I couldn't respond. My body betrayed me, paralyzed. The shadow mass drew closer, pressing into me from all sides. My skin felt tight, hot, as if the darkness were burning into me, threading itself beneath my flesh. And then the whispers multiplied, overlapping, louder and louder, until my eardrums felt like they would split. Names, commands, laughter, unintelligible yet deeply personal, flooded my mind. I understood with a terror that made my stomach turn. Every memory, every secret, every shame, every thought was known to them. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound. But the sound went nowhere. The walls absorbed it, feeding it back at me as distorted echoes. Panic consumed me. I clawed at the concrete floor, at the shadows, at nothing. Then blackness. When I awoke, I was back in my apartment. Everything was as it should be, or so it seemed. My clothes smelled faintly of rust and salt. My skin itched where the shadow had pressed against me. And on my forearm a mark. A symbol. A circle crossed by jagged lines burned into my skin. Touching it sent shivers through me. It pulsed faintly, alive. I had no idea how it got there, but it didn't matter. I understood instinctively, this was a brand. A claim. A bond. I looked into the mirror. My reflection was wrong. Subtle, at first, a twitch of the lips that wasn't mine, the blink of eyes darker than they should be, but unmistakable. The reflection smiled at me, knowing, aware. I realized then the truth. I wasn't just marked. I was tethered. Wherever I went, whatever I did, they would be there, in the corners, in reflections, in whispers beneath the hum of electricity, in shadows too quick to follow. Days blurred. Food, work, streets, everything became secondary to the low-level terror that never abated. My apartment felt smaller, walls closing in, furniture leaning just slightly wrong. Even breathing was suspect. Every mirror, every window, every screen, potentially watching, reporting. I started talking to myself to stay grounded. My words echoed back from the walls, sometimes distorted, sometimes whispered in reply. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or them. Every sound outside my apartment, footsteps, car doors, birds, seemed imbued with intent. I was being stalked by everything and everyone, and yet nothing tangible existed to confront. The packages stopped coming. At least physically. But they never left me. Then the mirror spoke. Not literally, not with lips, but in my mind. I was brushing my teeth, tired and dazed, when I froze. My reflection didn't mimic my movements. My eyes locked on its eyes and it spoke. You belong to us. You cannot leave. I staggered back. The toothbrush fell. My reflection smiled wider than a human should. Its lips curved impossibly unnatural. It leaned forward, closer, as if pressing through the glass. The line between my body and the reflection began to blur. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. Memories I didn't remember swirled in my mind. Feelings, urges, impulses, foreign yet intimately familiar. The first full night after the brand appeared, I heard scratching at the walls. Soft, deliberate, patient. I stayed awake, listening. Sometimes the scratches stopped, sometimes they moved, as if pacing. And always, the whispers. You are ours. Every waking moment became a test of sanity. Every shadow in my room seemed to pulse, waiting. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat properly. The city beyond my window continued, blissfully unaware, but inside my apartment, the world had contracted to these voices, these shadows, these eyes. Even when I tried to leave, the streets became mazes. The reflection followed me in shop windows, puddles, shiny cars. Pedestrians glimmered and warped in the corner of my vision. My phone buzzed constantly, messages that disappeared when I looked directly, or sometimes appeared with chilling commands. Run. Stop. Look behind you. I realized finally that no rational explanation existed. No authorities could intervene. No friends could help. Because they weren't people. They weren't human. And I couldn't even be certain I was still entirely myself. The more I resisted, the more vivid the hallucinations, or visions, became. Whispers, footsteps, shadows, the reflections in every surface. They wanted compliance, but also attention, observation, fear. The boundary between reality and nightmare no longer existed. And in the end, I understood something deeper, darker. I hadn't been the victim. I had been chosen. And now, I belonged to them. Not because they had taken me. Because I had always been theirs. Every reflection. Every whisper. Every shadow. Every night. Every moment. And the city outside, indifferent, would never know. I sat on the edge of my bed, the brand on my forearm glowing faintly under the dim light of the bedside lamp. My hand traced the jagged lines nervously, trying to convince myself it was temporary, an illusion, a trick of the skin. But it pulsed, alive, reminding me that the choice had already been made. The air in my apartment was heavy. The shadows clung to corners like living things, twitching slightly when I looked directly at them. Even the faint hum of electricity in the room seemed louder than usual, vibrating in my chest like a silent warning. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't want to see it, didn't want to touch it, but my curiosity, a mixture of fear and compulsion, won. Sleep now. Obey. The words burned in my mind. Obey? Sleep? I couldn't. My pulse raced, my muscles tensed. Yet exhaustion gnawed at me, pulling my eyelids down, the bed suddenly too inviting despite the terror pressing in from every corner. I lay down, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Every sound, the creak of the building, a car passing outside, the flutter of curtains in the wind, became a threat. Every shadow seemed to shift toward me. Sleep came only because my body could no longer resist, but even then, the darkness followed. I dreamed of nothing, just an endless black void that pressed against me, whispering my name. I awoke, convinced the previous night had been a fever dream. Sunlight slanted weakly through the blinds. My apartment looked normal, almost too normal. And then I saw the envelope on my bedside table. My name was typed neatly across it. I tore it open. A single page inside, sterile and impersonal. Tonight, 9 p.m. Abandoned warehouse by the docks. You will come alone. Obey. Resistance is meaningless. I froze. My pulse spiked, adrenaline flooding my body. My mind raced through possibilities: run, hide, call someone. But the memory of the black mirror, the whispers, the shadows, reminded me of the futility. Every choice I could conceive ended with the same terrifying conclusion: I could not escape. I moved through the day in a haze. Mirrors and hallways reflected my eyes, too wide, too dark. Shadows seemed to stretch toward me as I passed. Every reflective surface became a potential doorway for the watchers. By evening, I found myself standing before the warehouse. The building loomed like a corpse, rusted and hollow. Moonlight slivered through broken panes, and the wind carried the faint scent of salt and decay. My legs moved of their own accord, carrying me forward, betraying the terror clawing inside me. The air inside was thick and cold. Concrete walls absorbed sound, making my own footsteps feel alien, as though someone else was walking beside me. The shadows seemed denser here, almost fluid, moving independently of light. At first, silence. But then, a pressure. A sense of presence so heavy it pressed against my chest and stomach, making it difficult to breathe. I turned slowly. Nothing. And then, movement at the edge of my vision. Shadows shifted unnaturally, bending around corners, across walls. Whispers began. At first faint, unintelligible, overlapping, rising and falling like a tide. My name surfaced repeatedly, with variations I didn't recognize but understood all the same. Urgent, pleading, commanding. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, rocking slightly. The shadows thickened, gathering around me, pressing closer. My skin tingled, hair raised on end. The whispers overlapped until my own thoughts could not penetrate the cacophony. Then one voice emerged. Clear. Direct. Felt rather than heard. Obedience. It vibrated through my bones, a resonant command. I could not respond. My body was frozen, paralyzed under the invisible weight. The shadows drew tighter, surrounding me from all sides. My mind swirled with memories, some mine, some not. Secrets I didn't remember, thoughts I didn't recognize, emotions alien yet intimate. It was as if the darkness was stitching itself into my very being. I screamed. A guttural, raw sound. But the sound went nowhere. It was absorbed by the cavernous warehouse, then returned to me distorted, mocking. I clawed at the floor, at the walls, at nothing, desperate to feel something real. The shadows surged, enveloping me completely. I could feel them pressing against my skin, sliding beneath it. Every breath felt impossible. Blackness swallowed me. I woke on the floor of my apartment. The faint smell of salt and rust lingered in the air. My body ached as if I had been dragged through iron. And then I noticed the brand. On my forearm. A jagged circle, burning faintly. I touched it, and heat pulsed through my veins. I didn't need to see it to know, it marked me. Bound me. Claimed me. I looked in the mirror. My reflection wasn't mine. A twitch of lips, eyes too dark, a smile that didn't belong. It leaned forward, closer than it should have been. I stepped back, but the reflection mimicked none of my movements. It was alive. Every day was a test. Every reflection, window, puddle, shiny car, computer screen, potential watchers. Even the street outside, bustling and indifferent, was a stage for eyes I could not see. I spoke to myself to stay sane. My words echoed back, sometimes distorted, sometimes whispered in reply. I couldn't tell if it was hallucination or the voices themselves. Messages appeared on my phone from numbers I didn't recognize. Commands, warnings, threats. Stop. Look behind you. You belong to us. Every attempt to leave or resist brought a surge of hallucinations. Shadows grew more vivid, whispers louder. They didn't need to show themselves physically. The fear itself was enough. One night, brushing my teeth, my reflection moved independently. Its eyes locked on mine. You are ours. You cannot leave. The words reverberated in my mind, clear and undeniable. My reflection smiled wider than a human should. It leaned forward, lips curling impossibly. I staggered back. The line between myself and the reflection blurred. Memories and impulses, foreign yet intimate, swirled in my head. I realized then, I wasn't just marked. I was tethered. Every reflection, every shadow, every whisper was a link to them. My mind, body, and soul belonged to the unknown force that had chosen me. Days, nights, hours, time lost all meaning. I could no longer distinguish waking from dreaming. Every step outside felt observed. Every room at home felt suffocating. I understood finally, resistance was futile. Escape impossible. I had been chosen. I hadn't been the victim. I had been marked, branded, claimed. And wherever I went, whatever I did, they would be there. Watching. Whispering. Waiting. Even now, staring at the city lights beyond my window, I knew the truth. I was theirs. Not because they had taken me. Because I had always been meant to belong. Days merged into nights. Time became meaningless. Even the city outside seemed to twist, unfamiliar. Streetlights flickered strangely, casting shadows that didn't belong to anything. I began noticing subtle movements in every reflective surface, in puddles on the pavement, in glass windows of closed shops. Even when walking down crowded streets, I felt eyes. Not human eyes, something older, darker, patient. My pulse raced with every step, my hands twitching as if to ward off unseen contact. At home, the mirrors multiplied. Every glance betrayed another presence behind me, always just beyond the edge of perception. I could hear whispers now even when the apartment was silent. Names, commands, laughter, sometimes angry, sometimes mocking, sometimes sorrowful, interweaving into one constant hum. I stopped sleeping completely. Nights became stretches of listening, of waiting, of fighting invisible forces that toyed with my mind. The brand on my arm throbbed like a heartbeat, reminding me with every pulse that escape was impossible. One evening, I heard footsteps in my apartment. Not the building's creaks or a neighbor, but deliberate, slow steps approaching from the darkened hallway. I froze, barely breathing. "We see you," a voice whispered, not through the phone, not from a reflection, but directly in my mind. Clear, intimate, and chilling. I tried to move, to hide, but my legs trembled uncontrollably. The shadows seemed to swell, growing darker and denser, filling the corners of my vision. I realized I was no longer in control of the space. It wasn't just my apartment anymore, they had made it theirs too. A shape emerged from the corner. Not human yet humanoid. It lingered just beyond clarity, as though I could almost perceive its face if I dared to focus. Fear rooted me to the spot. My heart thudded violently in my chest. "You belong," it said. And then it was gone, dissipating into nothingness, or into my mind, I couldn't tell which. Days later, my phone buzzed with a new message. A video file this time. I hesitated, trembling, but the compulsion to obey overcame the fear. On the screen, my apartment, filmed from above. But this time, not from a ceiling camera. It was from inside my mind's eye. Every thought I had, every fear, every movement, replayed back at me as if someone, or something, was cataloging my very existence. The last frame froze on my reflection in the mirror. It smiled at me. Wider than a human could. The message beneath read: Observe yourself. Know yourself. Accept yourself. I dropped the phone, staring at the floor. Obedience was no longer a suggestion, it was survival. Yet the very act of following their commands twisted me further, stripping away my autonomy. Walking outside became an ordeal. The city itself was distorted. Familiar streets twisted, alleyways extended impossibly long, reflections in shop windows duplicated endlessly, showing glimpses of impossible events, shadowed forms just out of reach. I stopped trusting anyone. Strangers' faces blurred, their smiles turning sinister. Every passerby could be part of them. I began talking to myself in public to stay sane, whispering responses to whispers that only I could hear. Even in broad daylight, I felt the presence. Following. Watching. Waiting. One night, I returned home to find the bathroom mirror had changed. My reflection was delayed by a fraction of a second. It blinked after I did. Its lips twitched with a smile I did not make. Do not resist, it whispered directly into my mind. I recoiled. The reflection leaned closer, almost pushing through the glass. My body twisted, but my mind could not escape. Memories and thoughts that were not mine flooded me. I understood. Resistance was impossible. I wasn't just marked. I was tethered, bound to them, to the unknown entity or entities that had chosen me. Weeks passed, or perhaps only days. Time had no meaning. I stopped sleeping entirely. I spoke to the shadows, naming them to maintain some sanity, but the voices only multiplied in response. The city, the apartment, mirrors, screens, puddles, they were all conduits. Every reflection, every whisper, every sound became part of a constant observation. My movements, my thoughts, my fears, they catalogued and twisted me. And still, the mark on my arm throbbed. It reminded me that I could never escape. They were inescapable. Omnipresent. Unseen, yet undeniable. I began to accept the inevitable. Obedience was the only path. Survival depended not on flight, but on surrender. One evening, I stood before a cracked mirror in my apartment. My reflection moved independently. Its eyes were hollow, pupils deep and endless. Its lips curled in a knowing smile. You belong, it whispered. The realization struck fully. I hadn't been the victim. I had been chosen. And now, I belonged to them. Every shadow, every whisper, every reflection, linked, alive, watching, patient. Always patient. Even the city outside, bustling and unaware, meant nothing. I was theirs. Not because they had taken me. Because I had always been theirs. I understood then that the terror, the whispers, the shadows were not punishments or warnings. They were a part of belonging. I was tethered. I was observed. I was marked. And the mark would never fade. The reflection smiled again, impossibly wide, and I finally understood, this was not the end. It had only begun. Morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, but the air in my apartment was thick, almost alive. My forearm throbbed where the brand burned faintly into my skin, pulsing with a rhythm that felt like it was syncing with my heartbeat. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, A hallucination, something temporary. But the reflection in the mirror betrayed me. My eyes held a darkness that was not mine, and the corner of my lips twitched with a smile that should have been impossible. The walls seemed to breathe. Even the faint hum of electricity in the room vibrated unnaturally, sending shivers down my spine. My apartment, once a place of safety, had become their territory, and I was intruding. As night fell, I began to hear it. A faint whispering, seemingly just behind me. At first, it was a single voice. "It's here, be aware, watch." I spun around. Nothing. The shadows in the corners of the room moved unnaturally, stretching and pulsing. My heart raced, and each breath felt like it could shatter my chest. I realized then, my mind was no longer private. Every fear, every thought, every secret was somehow exposed. A small movement caught my eye. Behind me, a shadow, but when I turned, it vanished. The one by the window swayed, pointing somewhere in the darkness, then dissolved. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Not the creaks of the apartment, not a neighbor, steps that should not exist. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. "Watch. Observe. We are with you." I dropped it, trembling. These were not words, they were commands, etched directly into my body and mind. Days bled into nights. Hours stretched endlessly. The city outside moved normally, but my world narrowed, twisted. Apartment hallways became mazes, mirrors multiplied, reflecting more than my own image. Reflections followed me, always just beyond the edge of vision. Strangers' faces blurred into grotesque parodies of human expression. I whispered to myself to maintain sanity, but even the whispers came back to me, distorted, layered with voices I could not identify. One evening, in the bathroom, my reflection delayed by a fraction of a second. Its lips moved independently, and then it whispered directly into my mind. "Do not resist, you are ours." I stumbled back. My mind filled with thought louder. My apartment was no longer mine. Even outside, the city had become a labyrinth. Streets bent, alleyways elongated impossibly, reflections duplicated endlessly. I saw shapes just at the edge of my vision, fleeting yet undeniably aware. I began to accept the inevitable. Obedience was no longer a choice, it was survival. My own reflection smiled back at me now, wide and unnatural, lips twisting in a mockery of life. I could no longer tell where I ended and the reflection began. Voices and shadows followed me even when I closed my eyes. My thoughts were no longer private. I was a vessel, cataloged, observed, tethered. Standing before the cracked mirror, I finally understood. I hadn't been the victim. I had been chosen. And now, I belong to them. Every shadow, every whisper, every reflection, all alive, patient, relentless. The city outside might never know, but I did. I had always been theirs. And the darkness waited, watching. Always patient. Always present. The apartment was silent. Too silent. Even the faint hum of electricity had vanished, leaving only the soft, insidious sound of my own breathing. Shadows pooled in the corners, darker than the night outside, twisting, stretching, as if reaching toward me. I moved to the living room, heart hammering. Every step echoed unnaturally. The brand on my forearm pulsed faintly, reminding me that I wasn't alone. I wasn't just being watched, I was tethered. Bound. Claimed. Then I heard it, a whisper. So soft, almost inaudible. "We are here." I froze. The words weren't outside, they were inside my head. Not spoken, but felt, vibrating through my bones. I ran to the kitchen, to the door. I had to get out. Any sense of reason told me to lock it, barricade myself, escape. but instinctively I left it open. A cold draft slipped through, and with it, the faintest sound of movement. Something unseen stepped into the apartment, unseen but unmistakably present. My pulse raced, my hands trembled. The shadows shifted toward the doorway, stretching, pulsing. I couldn't see it, couldn't name it, couldn't fight it. But I could feel it, patient, and waiting. I backed away, pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. And then the whispers multiplied, filling the room, crowding my mind. "We are with you, always." The apartment felt impossibly small now. The ceiling pressed down, the floor tilted, the walls leaned closer. Every reflective surface, mirror, window, the black screen of my phone, held a fleeting glimpse of something that was not me. And I understood fully, the terror didn't need a face. It didn't need a name. It only needed to exist, here, in my home, in my mind. I glanced at the door one last time before stepping back into the shadows. I couldn't close it. I didn't want to. The apartment waited. The shadows waited. And somewhere, beyond sight, something was moving. Something I could not see. And it was patient.